Dear children, in our last session I have explained about two types of forces acts on a body when it is kept immersed in a liquid. Which are the two forces? The force due to the weight that acts downward, and the liquid apply an upward force that which is known as buoyant force. These are the two types of forces exerted on the body which is kept immersed in a liquid. So here, today I am going to give you the explanation for the observation which we have now done by doing an activity. So the first, what was our first observation? Do you remember? Yes. Some objects sinks in water while some other floats. This was our first observation. Do you remember the activity? Okay. So what's the reason that we have to find out today? Okay. So here, for that we will recollect. We will recall what we learned in our previous class. That is in 9th standard you have learned more about forces and their its effects. So two forces when acts on a body which are unbalanced force, and then the object will move towards the direction of greater force. That is what we learned in previous class. So that is two forces unbalanced, that is two unbalanced forces when acts on a body which is in equilibrium, then the object will move towards the direction of greater force, isn't it? That here we have to apply in that observation. Okay, so here let me explain it with one of the activity. So here, suppose this is the object which kept immersed in the liquid, and this bottom finger represents the force exerted by the liquid on the body. Okay, that is upward, in the upward direction, buoyant force. And this finger which is on the top of the body apply a downward force, okay, which represents the weight of the body. So listen, and if the weight of the body is greater than the buoyant force, that is which force? Downward force is greater than the buoyant force. Here you can see one is downward, weight is downward, and the buoyant force is in the upward direction. So both the forces acts in opposite direction. Okay, and if both are unbalanced, here if the weight of the object is greater than the force, upward force exerted by the liquid, then the object will move downwards. It will sink. Okay, so here if the weight of the object is greater than the upward force, then the force will downward direction. Greater force will be in the downward direction and the object will move downward and it will sink. And if a force downward force weight is there and the upward force is greater than this weight, then the body will partially sink in the liquid. Not completely, but partially it will sink in the liquid. Partially immersed. The object will be partially immersed in the liquid. But if both the forces are balanced, that is upward and downward, both weight and buoyant force, both are balanced each other, the body will float on the water surface. Okay? So these are the three conditions. Now do you understand why this some objects sink in liquid and while some other object floats in the same liquid? Do you follow our first observation? Understood? So this is the reason why some objects sinks in water while some other objects float. Understood now? Now let us see some situations in our daily life where the buoyant force is experienced in liquids and gases. Some situations in our day-to-day life where buoyant force is experienced in liquid and also in gases. Dear children, I told the forces of fluid means it will be the force in liquid as well as gases, both together known as fluids. Fluid means whichever flow. The objects which flows are known as fluids. The liquid and gases both flow, so both together known as fluids. Okay, now the first situation where buoyant force experiences. You have learned, you know the hydrogen balloon, isn't it? So this hydrogen filled balloons, when released, it will move upward, rises up in the air. And then the next situation, do you have well in your house? Do you draw water from the well? Yes, if so, you might have experienced the second situation. When the bucket filled with water is immersed in the water. When the bucket immersed in the water, and then when we draw the water, we experiences a less weight inside when the bucket is inside the water. As the bucket rises up and after the surface level, when we draw it, the weight will be more. This is the another experience. Then next situation is the bubbles rises upward, the bubbles from the water rises upward direction. That also is due to this buoyant force. And then next one, when a cork put in the water, it floats. This also another example. So now I told you 4 examples which in which we experience buoyant force in liquids and gases. So air filled balloons, hydrogen filled balloons rises upwards, and the second one I told, when we draw water from the well, when the bucket is very deep in the water, when we draw water, we will experience less weight, and when it rises up above the level water surface, then more weight. And the third one, the bubbles underwater, formed underwater, rises up. And then the fourth one, cork put in water, floats. So these all are the situations where we can experience this buoyant force in liquids and gases. Now, I told you buoyant force is a kind of force. You know that force is a vector quantity, it has magnitude as well as direction. So, how can we measure buoyant force? So, buoyant force has magnitude. So, how can we measure this buoyant force? Okay. So, for that explanation for that is, for that we have to take an object, measure its weight in air. So, how to measure the weight of an object in air? What device can we use? Yes, we can use a spring balance to measure the weight. So, we measure the weight of an object which you have to keep inside the water, immerse in water, and to find the buoyant force acting on that object. So, that object you have to find the weight in air. Then, by using the same spring balance, you immerse this object in liquid, water or any liquid in which you have to find the whose buoyant force you have to find. So here this immerse in that liquid, then find the reading, note down the reading on the spring balance. Then you can notice that these two readings will show some difference. Okay, different reading we obtained while measuring in the weight in the air and while measuring the weight in liquid. Both the measures are different. You will get the different measures. Why? What is the reason? This, when it is immersed in liquid, liquid exerts an upward force. So due to that force, the weight, the ring needle shows less weight. Okay. So this difference will give you the loss in weight in that liquid. So the difference in weight in air and weight in the liquid is the loss of weight of that object in the liquid. And this loss of weight of an object in the liquid gives the buoyant force exerted by that liquid on the body. So this way we can find out the measure, find out the measure of buoyant force. Okay, is it clear? So let us see her. Let us revise what we learned today. Here are the reasons behind our first observation, that is, some object sinks while some other object floats in liquid. So first, if the weight of the object is greater than the buoyant force, the object sinks. If buoyant force greater than the weight of the object